In this episode of Is It Really Worth It to Make Something Homemade or Not, we're talking about croutons for your summer salads. Should you make homemade croutons or should you just grab the bag from the store? So here we go. We're gonna get right into it. I'm not gonna spoil anything. I tend to always do that. We're not gonna do that, but I'm gonna go through the ingredient cost breakdown, comparing everything as close as I can, ounce for ounce, so that we can get an accurate look at, is it really worth it to make it homemade or not? And also I'm gonna show you how to make homemade croutons. It's actually really simple. So let's get to it. Store-bought versus homemade croutons. Let's look at this cost comparison. So here is a store brand bag of croutons. This is a 5-ounce bag, $1.64. There's a name brand that's actually, the bag is the same size, for about $4 with some different seasoning options. So that a range from $1.64 to $4 for the store-bought options. For the homemade options, I have some already sliced loaf bread, country loaf bread. That'll be easier to slice. And then I have a frozen country loaf that's an actual full loaf that we can slice up as well. That's warming up in the oven. And then we have olive oil and garlic salt. You can use melted butter as well, or if you want to do a different seasoning blend that you love, maybe you wanted to do like an everything, but the bagel seasoning, something like that, whatever seasoning blend you like, you can use that. I'm just gonna go simple with garlic so that it goes with, you know, kind of whatever. Cost for the frozen loaf is $3.10. The cost for the sliced loaf is $3.58. And then the olive oil, couple cents, the garlic salt, 5 to 10 cents. So we're not using a lot of either of those. So we're gonna be under $4, $3.50 to $4 for these loaves. If you need to do a gluten-free bread, that will be slightly more. So if you need a gluten-free crouton, you can follow the same method that I'm about to show you to get a gluten-free crouton. So now that we have the comparison, let's get to prepping these croutons so we can compare, is the cost really less for the store-bought? I'm gonna guess, based on like the croutons are up to here, and once we cut all that and kind of fluff it up, if you will, with the other ingredients and let those bake, I think we're gonna get a lot more. So it might be similar or cheaper to be making the homemade. So let me show you how to do this, and then we'll compare here in a bit. I'm gonna go ahead and just use this sliced loaf, even though that other French loaf is still in the oven warming up. It was frozen, so I just wanted to warm it up. But it's about the same size as this loaf, and it's not pre-sliced. So I'm just gonna slice these in a couple stacks at a time so I can get small. And I am gonna just leave the crust on. It's pretty thin. If I see any super thick crusty spots, I will go ahead and slice those off, but I think for now I'm just gonna leave them on. Actually, like, here's a little crust piece that just freed itself. So we'll pull maybe a little bit of this off, this top section. Okay. So we're actually going to cut these fairly, you know, bite-sized, if you will. They're croutons. And I'm gonna toss them here into this bowl. And then I'm going to add the olive oil, toss it around, and the seasoning. We want stale bread. This isn't exactly stale, so the more stale the better, but I'm just using this to show you. Actually, that's actually a pretty stale piece right there, that top part. Perfect. We're actually going to bake this in the same method that we do the overnight granola. So if you haven't watched that video, you need to watch that, and I will put the link here. Some of this middle pieces might be too soft, but we're gonna try. They might be a little big too. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna bake this at 350 for 15 minutes, and then I'm gonna turn off the oven and let the croutons continue to dry out for about an hour or two. So we're actually gonna, oops, sorry, my bracelet is hitting. We're going to be back in a little while, but I want these to have full opportunity to dry out and get super crunchy. So by baking for 15 minutes, leaving them in the oven, then we're gonna get these fabulous croutons. So even just by filling up about half of the bag here, I can already tell that this is gonna be a lot more than what's in that bag right there. I'm just trying to be this softer bread in the middle. It'll be okay once we dry it out. We would just want these small pieces. These are pretty little. Okay, all into the bowl. I'm just gonna break it up a little bit. Cut this. I did not even cut these whole sections. Look at what I'm doing. I'm showing you and then I'm moving on too fast. Slow down, Erin. Okay, sorry my bracelet keeps popping the side of this bowl. Y'all were probably like, wait, don't throw those in. You didn't cut them yet. This is the benefit of watching and not doing. Well, we've had so many snafus over the years, but that's real life, right? That's life work. So this right here is already more than what's in this bag, and this is maybe a little more than half of this loaf. So we're gonna get a whole lot more. So just as kind of I predicted in the cost comparison section a minute ago, I feel like this is gonna end up being a lot of croutons compared to how much is actually in the bag, which is exactly why we're doing these videos this way. I want you to see that even though it might look cheaper to buy store-bought, when you can do homemade, it might actually be cheaper. And it hasn't always been the case. We've seen that. Okay, this middle part I'm gonna not use. I'm gonna let some teenager just gobble that up. I'm sure they will. And just those couple, just that middle section, so that's fine. All right, let me brush off all of this. Okay, so there you can see that. I mean, it's a lot. This bowl is, I wouldn't say half full, but it's pretty full, but it's also a really big bowl. Here, I am just going to kind of drizzle a really thin layer right over the top. That is plenty, a couple of tablespoons probably. We don't want like anything to be like super coated, but we certainly want that to help with adding a touch of a barrier between the heat from the oven and as it dries out as we leave it in there. So we're gonna just toss the olive oil. You could also use melted butter, just a couple of tablespoons. I think that was probably about 2 to 3 tablespoons. And that was for that. I think there were 14 slices in this. And then I'm gonna do a teaspoon of garlic salt all around, and I will definitely toss this together because there is lots of nooks and crannies in these little, in this country loaf that you need to get the garlic salt in, and you also don't want it to be like a couple croutons have a ton of garlic and others have none, because that would be sad. So really toss this well. Okay. Oops, I knew that was gonna happen. There's always an escape artist. Okay, so this is well tossed. I'm gonna grab a lined baking sheet. We're gonna spread this into a thin layer and get it into the oven. Okay, perfect timing. This is the country loaf that I mentioned. I found it in the freezer section. There's also other loaf bread you can get from the bakery. So that's just the one that I grabbed from the store. So it's gonna be about the same amount of bread as this 14 slice loaf that we had. It's a little flatter and a little wider, but I think pound for pound, crouton for crouton, this frozen loaf will be very similar, as would a French loaf from the bakery. So this is just a rimmed baking sheet that I did add a liner to. You shouldn't need to grease it because we did do that olive oil layer, but if you wanted to do just a touch of spray, that's not gonna hurt either. If you also see any like kind of dry spots, you could just do a quick spray on top as well. Like this one's fairly dry right here. Dry meaning no olive oil, or not as much olive oil right there. So I might just add a little bit of spray to a couple of these spots, but we're just trying to get this into one layer. We want it to be, these pieces are trying to partner up, but I'm gonna try and break them up. And then some of those center doughier pieces are sticking together. Yeah, and we're gonna get this into the oven. We're gonna bake at 350 for 15 minutes, and then I will turn off the oven, let it sit in there for a little while, and then I'll come back with a comparison. Here we have our croutons. They're perfectly dried out. You can hear how perfectly dried out they are. That bake for 15 minutes and let them stay in the oven. This pan is still a little bit warm. I left them in there for about an hour. I could have left them in there longer, but I just grabbed them now because I'm ready to do this comparison. There's some little crumbs in there too, perfect. There's the two right there. This certainly has more. So I was thinking if this made a lot more, then it would be worth it versus this. So $1.64 to $4 depending on which brand you're getting. This was under $4 to $4.25 depending on the sliced bread that you use. If you let one of those $1 French loaves, if you slice it and let those pieces go stale and then slice it smaller into these, you'll get a lot more. That loaf would even give you double of this amount. So that $1 French loaf that we have at our local grocery store and our bakery, it's gotta be a loss leader for them, but we love to grab that and cook with it. So that would be an even cheaper way to do these croutons. So I think that homemade wins because you can pick the style of bread you like, you can pick the seasoning you want. If you want a little creamier flavor, use melted butter instead of the olive oil. So I think homemade wins. It's fairly simple to do. The longest part is cutting up the bread, then you let the oven do the baking and then let it all cool down and you get these gorgeous, crispy, crunchy croutons. Hear that? See how crispy, crunchy those are? Perfect for salad. So there you have it. I think in this case, homemade is going to be the winner. Okay, how to store these croutons, because there is a lot of them. I'm gonna transfer them into a resealable baggie, and I can keep them in the pantry as long as it's sealed really well. I live in the land of a lot of humidity, so these will not stay crunchy if I don't seal them up really well. If I do a large batch and I'm not gonna get to them all right away, then I will seal them up in a bag like this and then put them into the freezer. So sealed in a bag for probably up to a week. If not, put them into a freezer safe container, sealed up, and keep them in the freezer, and then just let them come to room temperature. It does not take very long. These are small little bits. They'll come up to room temperature really quickly and you can toss them on your salad. Homemade is so easy, right? Way easier than you think. Like you think homemade croutons, oh, that sounds like a lot's involved. Super not a lot involved, right? You saw that. Here we have it, there's my winner. If you learned something new, you're gonna give homemade croutons a try, hit me up with a thumbs up. This would be great for like a summer party or like a salad bar, like if you're doing like a buffet style salad bar with a group of ladies or something like that. Super great option and fun way to sort of level everything up with some seasoned as you like them homemade croutons. Also subscribe, we're releasing new videos all the time. You don't want to miss out on any of those. You can also see all the other episodes in this Is It Really Worth It series here on the channel as well. All right, my friends, it's bye for now, and I'll see you in the next video.